This is Isaac Hoskins, and you're watching Time to Connect.
Hey, Isaac Hoskins, man. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for taking the time to connect. We've been trying to do this for a while. I've been following you for a good while. You played on a couple of my live streams. Gosh, has that been a couple of years ago? And we
Yeah, I think
recently
so.
you were generous enough to allow me to open for you up at Dan Silverleaf, which was, man, that was huge for me. But listen, man, thank you. I'm really, really pleased to have you on this podcast.
Oh, thank you for asking me. Thanks for being interested. I'm flattered to be included for sure.
Oh man, I'm flattered as well that you're here. Now you've been keeping busy, man. I've been kind of tracking your tour schedule a little bit, and things are kind of popping for you. How's that tour going?
It's going good, man. I haven't really gone on a big tour per se, but I'm setting things up. They're looking good for the summer, for the spring and the summer for me to get away from Denton County a little bit.
Mm.
So yeah, I've been staying busy, man. I gotta keep the lights on. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to play as much as possible.
I hear you. I saw the schedule, the so far schedule on the website. And by the way, I just have to say, speaking of the website, I'll put the link in the show notes, but people need to go check that out. There's a lot of great stuff on your website, including some really cool merch that you have for sale there. So I encourage people to go check that out. But looking at your tour schedule, it looks great, but it's pretty much just all Texas. Do you have any plans in expanding that beyond Texas at some point?
Yeah, actually, just got off the phone with a guy. I'm working on a tour, Wyoming and Montana. Should be doing that in July, late July, and obviously Colorado and the Panhandle of Texas on the way up for that.
Yeah, that's great.
Doing a thing in Oklahoma, doing a weekend run in Oklahoma, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend.
Hmm.
Going to be out in Marathon, Texas, out around Big Bend
Yeah.
this weekend.
Oh, cool.
I guess that starts on the 17th of February.
Yeah.
So,
Unfortunately,
yeah, a little
un, un,
driving.
unfortunately, Isaac, I've got so much backlog that this episode probably is not going to go live until it might be May actually. So
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah. So when people hear this, they'll say, "Damn, I wish I'd have known about the marathon thing." Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
Will Johnson's playing it too, so that'll be fun to get to hang out with Will.
Yeah, I saw that. I would love to come down there for that, and I love the Big Bend area. I've probably been to Big Bend National Park, I don't know, 20 times, maybe more. It's kind of a place my wife and I really hold dear, and we like to get down there quite often. Have you ever played the Starlight Theater down there in Terlingua?
No, only thing I've ever done is this deal. It's called the Big Bender, and I would love to. Next year, I always say this. Next year, I'm going to plan ahead a little better and try to play there and Railroad Blues and some other places
Cool,
close by. So
cool.
yeah, no, the only other place that I've ever played in that area, I played Fort Stockton a couple different times. I played a place called the Old 76,
Hmm.
and then I played another museum. I think it's called Annie Riggs Museum. I'm not even sure who that was, but that's been a long time ago. But yeah, I love getting out that way for sure.
Yeah, right on. And are you with the tour you have lined up? How much of that is going to be able? Are you going to be able to take the band on the road? Are those guys able to go with you?
Yeah, for some of it. For the first leg, the Colorado leg of that Wyoming tour, the band's going to be there. And then I think my bass player is going to continue on with me up through those. But the rest of the guys have conflicts and money
Sure.
doesn't really make sense. So
Yeah,
that's a long way to drive with five guys to pay. So
yeah, yeah.
um, for the first part of that, yeah, they're going to be around. And then once we leave the Denver area, we're going to head up and probably hit Cody, Wyoming. I can't remember exactly where it starts, but
Hmm.
then that'll just be either me or maybe a duo, depending
Yeah,
on
yeah.
all the logistics.
Well, it is a kick-ass band, man. You guys, it sounds so good. How did that band come together? How were you able to kind of bring that configuration together?
All those guys I've known for years. Tex Bosley, our drummer, I think was probably the first guy that decided he was interested in playing with me, and we've been friends long before we ever played music together. But I mean, as you know, and probably have seen coming up here, the Denton music scene is not all that big. You know, we're all pretty close as far as being friends, and there's only so many places for us to all congregate and talk about the things that we talk about. So
But
all
it's
those
real.
guys,
It
you
may not
know,
be big, Isaac, but it's real good.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's the
Yeah.
thing about it, you know, is it's a friendly competition between everybody as to see who can make the coolest art, you know. And um, so Tex and Jesse, our bass player, I've known those guys for years. They live here in Denton. Our guitar player Chad, he lives in Gainesville, so not far, but he's played in bands that I've played shows with for years and years. So when Chad joined up, I was real excited, and still super excited to have Chad in the band. And we're kind of bouncing around between fiddle players, auxiliary players, steel. You know, a lot. I think the last time you saw us, we had a dobro guy who's a
Yeah.
good friend of all of ours, but he plays in a band called the Wilder Blue with Zane Williams and Paul Eason and a couple other guys. And so they, you know, they've got something going that I can't pay him what his hand pays him. So
Sure. Sure.
he's doing that thing. But yeah, you know, when we can, we play together, and it's been pretty much at least the same rhythm section for the entirety of when I decided to start doing a more country show, you know.
Yeah.
So
I have to tell you, I played in several bands over the years, but lately it's been really more like what I did, opening up for you, solo, maybe a duo, a couple of people sit in once in a while. But watching you guys, listening to you guys, I was talking to my friends. They're going, "Man, I need to get a band together again." It's just such a whole different vibe. I know it's a lot more difficult to manage, and sometimes it's fun just being, having the ability to travel around solo. But hey, listen, there's so many questions I have for you, but we should back up and share a
sure.
little bit about your biography with people. It certainly is interesting. I've checked it out a little bit. Oklahoma to Kansas to Texas. By the way, I'm from Kansas originally too.
Oh, I
Bartender,
didn't know that.
yeah, bartender, construction worker, ranch hand, beer truck driver. Yeah, man, if you will, just kind of give people maybe your potted biography. Who is Isaac Hoskins?
Oh wow. Well, I grew up in Kansas. I was born in Oklahoma, but shortly thereafter we moved to Kansas. I think I was about 3 or 4 years old. Just following jobs. You know, my stepfather was a railroader. He was a train engineer for Santa Fe, Burlington Northern, and they shut the depot down in Winoka, Oklahoma, where we lived. So
Hey, keep
um,
talking, man.
the nearest place that he could work was Wellington, Kansas. So that's where I was raised.
Got you.
And I lived there until I was 18, and then I went to junior college in Arc City, and you know, all that. Went to OU, and then about halfway through semester at Wichita State, I decided that I wanted to do what I wanted to do and not what somebody else wanted me to do. I had a couple friends die within about a 2 week period, so I decided that I better get to doing what I thought was important at the time. There are days that I question that decision, but um, so yeah, I've been in Texas for 20. It would be 20 years in October of this
Hmm.
year. So
Hmm. How'd you land?
it's
How'd you
been a
land
long
in
time.
Denton? Denton specifically. Sorry to interrupt, man.
Well, you know, no, it's okay. It was pretty kind of strange happenstance sort of. My cousin lived in Crum, which is right outside of Denton. She was working there, and she was always and always still continues to be a huge supporter of what I do and my dreams. And so I lived with her for about 3 months, and I was going to move to Austin, and I just decided that I liked Denton just fine, so I stayed here, which is a good thing. I think had I gone to Austin, I just wasn't ready to be playing all the time. I didn't realize just how behind the curve I was as a musician and a songwriter. So
Mhm.
I learned how to do what I do here in this town, and it if will always, even if I'm not here any longer, will mean the world to me because there were people that were willing to help me become who I am now. You know, so um, Yeah, the short and long of it was I had a job and I had a place to stay, so I stopped in Denton, and come to find out, it's a great spot. It could have been just as easily Frisco or Hillsboro, who knows, any place. And I just lucked out. Denton's a perfect spot for me for sure.
Yeah, I love it, man. I got to Denton in '74, just when I graduated high school, and I started college there and lived there off and on. I moved away from Denton. I moved to Austin from Denton I believe in '95. So I
Mhm.
know Denton pretty well, though it's changed a whole lot. But going up there recently to open up for you, I was able to explore Denton a little bit, and though it's changed a lot, I think a lot remains the same. Denton is still a great place to live, and I still hold it as that place when I drive through or I stop in that just kind of feels like home in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into when I moved into Denton, and obviously, like I said earlier, I'm better for it. But it's just a different place, and that's why I love it. There's all different types of folks and different types of things, and though there's going to be your same old day to day. It's just not your average everyday cookie cutter place.
No,
So
no,
I dig it, and
yeah,
they're creeping in on us for sure. I mean, there'll be a Chick-fil-A on every corner pretty soon, but for the time being, the core part of the town is really held together well, and the arts community and the music community and educators, writers, all these people that live here in town
yeah,
really created a good environment for people like me. So
yeah, yeah. As long
I
as
dig it.
Dan Silverleaf and recycled books and records is still around, I think Denton will be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
So I was looking at your website, and I saw that I don't know how long ago this was, but you got sober for 12 months, and you spent 3 days and nights in the desert. Man, that sounds very biblical. What can you tell us about that? What you were
Yeah,
doing, and what the result of all that was?
we did decide to go with that on the bio because it was biblical. It was actually 4 days, and I was in the mountains, very close to the desert. But um, yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I had been in Las Vegas, surrounded by a bunch of really successful people. I mean, we're talking like big time successful Hollywood types, and I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt weird about it, and people were telling me that I did, and either way, I on my way home from Las Vegas, I had driven out there, so on my way home, I just stopped in Utah in the mountains for, oh, I don't know, it was 4 days that I stayed there and camped and ate, you know, ranch style beans out of the can, and and just kind of figured out how to go about the next phase of my life. I really do feel like it was the beginning of something and the end of something else.
Yeah,
It sounds kind of trite and silly to think about now, having been over a year ago, but it changed my life. It really did, and it only started to happen once I decided that I had to do that.
yeah,
So um, and I was sober for a full year, and then I wavered a little bit here and there, but it wasn't in a bad way. It's not like I'm living under the bridge now. But I did get back on the wagon, and I haven't had a drink in, I don't know, it's been over a month now.
okay,
Um,
okay,
I just decided, it was a good experiment for me to figure out, how do you feel, and is it worth it? What's the risk reward to having one night out every other week or so? And
yeah.
it just didn't ever pay off for me anymore. I
Well,
have lived and worked in and around that business and that lifestyle for so long that I'm just kind of over it. I just
yeah,
want to write songs and play them for people.
yeah.
So
Well, especially being in playing music, it's tough. I was listening recently to a podcast with Jeffrey Foucault, or actually he says Foucault. Do you know? Are you aware
mhm.
of him? Yeah,
Yes, I'm a fan for sure.
yeah, he's great, and
He
he was
does a great cover of Lodi.
he does indeed.
Yeah.
But he was talking about when he cut his first record. They got someone arranged some session guys for him, and he wanted to do things the right way, and he was asking his manager, asking the guy who was who was managing the studio, hey, what should I lay in for these guys? You know, should I lay in beer? Should I lay in whiskey? Should I get some weed? What should I do to make these guys happy? And he said, oh no, man, no, these are professionals, but they've been around too long. Coffee. Uh, uh, and he said, yeah, the thing is, when you're in this business long enough, you either get sober or you die or you get out of the business, most people. So yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, it's sober doesn't necessarily have to mean teetotaler, but yeah, it can go, it can become a problem when you're playing in bars all the time, and you gotta, you gotta grow up a little bit and take care of that for sure.
Yeah, I I kind of wish now, having been through that and looking back and seeing, how things went and why they. I'm glad that I did that when I did, but I wish it had been about 5 years earlier. I had to do a lot of living, and I had to have a lot of heartache and heartbreak and all the things that people have to live through in order to make them who they are.
Yeah.
But I feel like, it was kind of 15 years in a 10-year town kind of deal, where it's like, man, if I had just pulled the trigger on getting my shit together a little bit sooner,
Yeah.
think about how much further along I would be. But, that's all speculation. There's no
Yeah.
way to
That's
tell.
right. That's right. That's right. And you're in such a good place right now, man, that there really is no point in looking back. Well, hey, I want to talk about the new record, Bender, and I want to talk about your songwriting process. Got to talk about the Yellowstone thing. That's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Got some other kind of typical questions I asked, but let me see. Before we jump into that, I'm just guessing some of your songwriting influences had to be some of the Guy Clark Towns and Willie and Merle, and who do you count as some of your primary songwriting influences?
Oh, well, 100%. I mean, Guy Clark is my favorite probably ever. Him and Prine. There's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of them, there's so many, but I tell everybody Steve Earle was my gateway drug. That was the first time I ever heard anybody that was pushing the envelope that was being played on the radio.
mhm,
And so I started really, really getting into him a long time ago. It would have been in the 90s. And silly enough, I mean, he made his break in the 80s, but I was just a little kid. I didn't know what I
right,
was looking for.
yeah,
But I heard Guitar Town and Copperhead Road and all that stuff, just like everybody. And then I started reading his book, his biography, and that was the roadmap. That's what said, okay, here are all the people that you're going to worship for the next 20 years. And I didn't realize that that's what I was reading.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's called The Life and Near Death of Steve Earle, Hardcore Troubadour. And
It's on the
man,
shelf.
it changed. You got it over there?
Yeah, it's right there on the shelf. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it changed my life. I thought I was just going to go get a job stocking shelves at a Borders Books and
Uh-huh.
work for 2 months before I moved to Texas. And little did I know that the universe was giving me somewhat of a roadmap. It's pretty wild to think about now, because I had already decided to move here, but I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, man. Guy Towns. I love Towns Van Zant, but it pretty much was dark enough on my own. So I tried to I
yeah.
tried to go a little bit, maybe not necessarily subject matter wise, but I didn't study him as much as I did Guy Clark
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
James McMurtry.
Yeah,
I used to take his songs and literally just write out the lyrics and then try to map out the rhyme scheme and the wordplay and the alliterations and all those things to see how songs are written, because I
yeah,
didn't really know.
yeah.
I didn't
That's
know what I
great,
was
man.
doing.
That's great. Speaking of towns being dark, have you seen that clip from an interview? I'm pretty sure the interview was in Europe. It was fairly late in his life, and the interviewer said something like, um, let's see, he says, "Why are all your songs sad?" And Towns said, "They're not all sad, man. Some of them are downright hopeless." And
Yeah,
then,
I always go ahead. What?
no, you go ahead.
Oh, I just always think about that other quote, that Towns quote that um, he may have gotten from Lightning Hopkins, but he said, "Everything is the blues, unless it's zippity doo dah," or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
There's the blues, and then there's zippity doo
yeah,
dah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I wrote like that for a really long time, and I realized that I was not necessarily it was a bad thing, but at this point in my career still, I don't have a platform to do that just yet. You know, I've still got to play to the crowd a little bit,
Yeah.
and then they'll be interested in hearing what I have to say. So I try to split the difference between zippity doo dah and the blues. You know.
Well, man, I think, yeah, I hear you. And things don't have to be dark to be meaningful. I mean, something a song like the H Town Turnaround. I mean, that it just when I listen to that song, man, it's just like, oh, I know that. I mean, that just I relate to it very much. And so, there's a lot of ways to do this. Hey, before we talk about Bender, I want to ask you a question that is kind of important to me, which is we don't none of us write or work in a vacuum. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of traditions, and but we've got to find that balance, don't we? We don't want to be derivative. We don't want to be, too stuck in just form. But we also have to be to some extent. Did you grapple with that at all? Especially since your stuff is pretty straight ahead country. It's very much in a form. Do you struggle with that at all, or do you think about that much?
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, you know, when I first started doing this, I mean, I wanted to be Guy, and you know, there's nothing new under the sun. So I had to find
Yeah.
new ways to say, you know, Hank Williams got all the easy ones, you know, which and that's legendary stuff,
Well,
but he
Johnny
did it
Cash got a
first.
few of those easy ones too.
So you know, the Dove love rhyme is that's been done, bro. You got to figure, you know, dig a little deeper. So, um, but you know, I also that was another part of my maturation as a songwriter was, you know, I moved to Texas and then quickly discovered Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and the Bends. I know that sounds silly to some people that I didn't discover that stuff until much later, but I mean, I guess Yankee Hotel was still fairly new at that time. But you know, getting that sort of schooling on what a song can be from Tom York or you know
Jeff
Jeff
Tweedy.
Tweedy or whomever, it really changed me for a while, which was a good thing because I think that I wouldn't be the writer that I am now had I not learned how that it was okay to break all those rules.
Mhm.
Um, but I also didn't really understand just how good you have to be to have a band like that.
Mhm.
um, so it took me a while to really find my footing, and um, I mean, what I heard so You Want to Be an Outlaw, Steve Earle's country album, the real super duper honky tonk record that he made. And I said, I want to do that. So I
Yeah,
did. You know, I
yeah.
did my best version of it. And so who knows? Maybe the next record will be a little more complicated or a little bit weird. But yeah, man, finding ways to stay true to the tradition while also keeping it fresh is it's really hard to do. It
Yeah,
really is.
it
And
is.
somebody's going to be a naysayer no matter who, you know,
Right.
there's either going to be the fan that's the super duper traditionalist fan that's going to tell you that ain't country, and then there's going to be the other guy that's like, well, that's just,
Mhm.
you know, insert Hank Williams song or
Right,
whatever.
right.
So you know, it's hard. At the end of the day, being vulnerable and being okay with that, and just putting it out there has got to be enough. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what else can you do? You know, you just got to participate. And a lot of what I've learned over the years is that's the main thing is to do it and put it out. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so I'm been continually surprised at the people who are interested in the work that I just put out. You
Yeah.
know, I quit toiling over who I was ripping off on what song and
Yeah.
just put it out.
Yeah.
So
I forget who it was that said, "Good writers borrow, great writers steal." You know, I mean, and anyone who tries to argue, otherwise is just not really paying attention. I was reading a, I was, I'm an avid reader. I don't know if you read much, but I read a ton, and because I pay attention to language so much, and I read a lot, and I listen to so much music, I'm all the time finding, I'll be reading something and go, oh, I see. Guy was reading this, or
oh yeah.
Jerry Jeff was reading this. I was reading last night. I was reading a poem by Jim Harrison. I don't know if you know Jim Harrison, but if you don't, man, I highly recommend. A wonderful writer. And in this poem, he has this line. he was counting crows. And I said, ah, okay, now I know where they got the name of that band.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool.
yeah. But I see that stuff all the
Um,
time. Tweety is famous for that. There, you know, there's a book called a book by no, I'm going to blank on the American writer's name, but it's the name of the book is "Stand Still Like a Hummingbird." And there's lines in it that
okay.
just are lifted straight out of the book into the songs. I think that's okay, man. You change the context, you get the idea from someone, and you probably want to change it up a little bit, but I don't worry about that stuff, man.
I used to really worry about it a lot because the most important thing to me as a writer was the acceptance of my, well, I don't even want to say my peers, because the majority of the people that I was seeking uh, some sort of acceptance from were people that I looked up to, you know. So I wanted my favorite songwriters to think that I was a good songwriter.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out that they probably don't care because they're worried about their own career.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
borrow, you know, I've found it's a lot more freeing to be able to say, yes, I did borrow from this because I really respect what this person does.
That's right. Yeah.
I wanted to give them a nod, and I would imagine that, you know, most people who have found their words in songs or books or whatever it may be are probably get a little grin out of that too. You know, that
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
probably, it's probably kind of nice to go, hey, there's an admirer out there, whether they
Yeah.
know about it or not, you know.
Right. And it's not plagiarism. It's not like you're taking something and presenting it as your own. Let me give you an example, man. Sometimes the way I write, and it doesn't always work, but I'll take a book off the shelf and I'll just thumb through and I'll just kind of put my finger on a page and I'll look at a few of the words there. And I might get a line, you know, a short line, but I take it completely out of context, twist it around, and tell a new story using
Mhm.
a couple of those words. And anyway, hey man, uh, oh, sorry, I had another question I wanted to ask you. Oh, I want to talk about the album. Um, Great album. I know you're proud of it. You should be. And uh, just I wanted you to, if you would, just talk about the record, how it came to be, how you think about it, how it's doing, what was the recording process like. Just, you know, that's an open-ended question. Just talk about your record a little bit, if you will.
Sure, sure. Well, you know, I mean, like I said earlier, I heard that "So You Want to Be an Outlaw" record, and I thought, man, this is really what I should be doing. Not necessarily just because Steve Earle was doing it, but it seemed to be the beginning of what I felt like was a little bit of, well, there was just too many dudes that looked like me singing Blue Eyed Soul, you know, and I'm pretty good at that myself,
Yes,
but I've
you
been
are.
doing that for a long, long time.
Yes,
And
you are.
I decided, man, I'm gonna make the most um, country white record that I can make, and do it like although, you know, that side of my influences would have done. You know, I mean, I don't know how else to say that without being offensive. I just felt like there were plenty guys who, big, burly, hairy dudes that wanted to sound like Chris Stapleton, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to make a record that was, I didn't want to hear one more person say that I reminded them of him. And there's nothing against him. It's
Right.
just he's great, but you know, there's a lot of other dudes that do that thing too. So anyway, I wanted to make a record that gave a nod to the Haggards and the Joneses and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's so much that means a lot in that style of music that I think people kind of look past because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sure, the subject matter is one of five things, or, you know, my dog left, my wife left, all this stuff. There's just so much more to it than that to me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do my version of it and hopefully also entertain people at the same time. So,
That's right. Yeah.
I think that's really where the idea for the record came from. That and the fact that, I mean, let's be honest, man, I live in Texas. I want to make a living playing music.
Yeah.
Like, what better way to do that than to start playing dance halls? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to be doing right now. And there's money to be made doing that.
And it feels good,
I'd
man,
like to
doesn't
still
it?
continue.
It
Yeah,
feels good standing on that stage, watching these people being I mean, I watched it. I watched your show recently. I just, man, these people are really into it. You're making them feel good. That's
Mm.
magic.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And I feel like, having done this last couple of years the way that I did, um, I think it's given me a lot more bullets for my gun than I ever thought it would have. I don't know if that makes very much sense, but there's just that many more tools in my tool bag.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I can go and play a folk show and do well at it. And then you put me on stage with a honky tonk band, I can do that too, and a rock band. So I feel like it's made me a better player
Yeah.
and a better entertainer. Um, so I don't know. I think I may be getting off track, but there are other things that I would like to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that building a following and using my roots to do so is probably the best course of action. It seems like the most organic way to go about it
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Well, and I
So,
think that's one of the great things about music today. When I was growing up, back in the olden days, man, you had to stay in your lane. I don't know if you had to, but people did. You just didn't see, and then we had this term crossover, like you're somehow doing, but there's definitely a sense now. I think Tweety, and speaking of him, is one of the guys who's done it. He does some just really pretty pure country stuff. He does some really whacked out, almost jam band kind of stuff, and everything, and real pop stuff, and playing with people as disparate as Nora Jones and Nels Klein, and I'm not even sure who else. But yeah, I think that it's almost like we have permission now. I don't have to stay in my lane. If you want to put out a folk album next, I don't think anyone's going to go, "What happened to him?" I think that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That's the other deal about Steve Earle, man, is he is number one married to the song. If the song is good and all these songs fit together well, then let's do that right now,
Yeah.
And I love that because I mean, there are other artists that I really am a huge fan of that have made the same record for 15, 20 years or
Right.
30 years. And I'm like, come on, like
Yeah.
let's try to push it a little bit, man. You're not going to lose your audience because you went acoustic or.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I would like to be able to do is like Steve, created an environment to where people are expecting um, maybe a slight departure. Now, it's not like I guess he already kind of did make an electronic record, but
Yeah.
keep it somewhere in the Americana canon, and I think I'll be okay.
Right on. Yeah. Man,
Yeah,
time is slipping by pretty fast. Can we go about another 10 minutes? Is that okay with you?
man, we can do whatever you need to do. I seriously, I'm not in any hurry at this
Yeah.
point, and I enjoy talking about myself and the things that I love to do. So
Well, I think
that's fine with me.
you and I could talk for hours. One of my ideas in this podcast, though, is to keep them a little shorter. I think there's
Hmm.
plenty of 2 and 3 hour podcasts out there that I don't know. I guess people listen
Definitely.
to them, but my idea was to keep these at about 45, 50 minutes. But that's okay. Let's talk a little bit more. You have to tell us about the Yellowstone thing. It's
Hmm.
fascinating. Maybe an abbreviated version of how that came about, and for people who don't know, tell them what it is.
Well, the short story of it, I guess, is I had just accepted a gig to open up for a guy named Jason Hawk Harris at a place called the Magnolia Motor Lounge in Fort Worth. And I took it, and it was I think it was a Thursday night, and I got up to open the show, and this couple walked in. I think second song it turned out to be Taylor Sheridan and his wife Nicole,
Yeah.
and they had gone to Fort Worth to meet some people, and they ended up going to the wrong place. And when Taylor heard me play, he refused to leave. He said, "We're staying here. If they want to meet us, they can come here." So um, and my life has been a lot different since then. I owe that guy a lot of stuff, and it's not necessarily just because of Yellowstone, but it has a lot to do with that. So I don't know. He's hired me over the years to play a lot of different events and stuff, and I sent him the new record. I actually played it for him at an event that I played, and I played him the rough cut of the mixes, and he was all about it. He said, "We're going to use that." Just let me know when it's
so
done.
far, is maybe I'm wrong. Is it just one song so far that's been used, or have more songs been used in the?
No, they used a couple.
Okay.
There was one where I was in the show personally, like I was on screen for this bar fight scene that happened, and that was a song called "Off the Wagon," which honestly, like, it was not my best song, but it's been streamed
Yeah.
like 250,000 times or something crazy.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
there was that one, and then H Town Turnaround was in
Right.
another episode
Yeah.
later. And you can't. I mean, it's a really dramatic scene, and it's kind of a strange spot for that song. But I think that it illustrates well the like sudden change of mood that this scene is supposed to
Yeah.
illustrate. Someone dies and they come, back, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, let's put the brakes on this party that we're having." So it's in the background, but you know, it once again, I mean, there's a lot of people that know about my music that didn't before.
Yeah.
So
It's cool. It's real
um,
cool.
the main thing about all that stuff, I mean, everything that Taylor's ever done for me was really just gave me some confidence that I had maybe lost
Yeah.
or didn't have.
Yeah.
That there were people that were going to be that were going to respond to what I was trying to do, and that it wasn't a lost cause. So
Yeah. Right on. Yeah.
it yeah, I'll never be able to say a bad thing about that dude for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, man, let's kind of wind down with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And I mean, the idea is short answer. If you want to talk a little longer, that's fine, or you can just give a real short answer to these. Um, and some of these are impossible questions. Just first thing that comes to mind: most memorable show that you've played.
Oh man. Really, the most memorable thing I've ever done on a stage was at Carnegie Hall. I sang a piece of music like right after 9/11. Yeah, and I was in a group. I was in a vocal performance group, um, and we sang there. I didn't. It was nowhere near what I do now, but I got to sing at Carnegie Hall at like age 22 years old, so or 21, and that was cool. That
Yeah,
to this day, it's still probably one of my favorite things ever.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Favorite show or most memorable show you've attended? What comes to mind when you're sitting
Oh
around
my God.
sharing stories about, well, I saw this band or I saw this guy. What comes to mind for you?
I know it's probably there's so many. I think probably one of the most moving shows that I can remember seeing recently was Lyle Lovett's acoustic band. I saw them. We didn't see them on this recent tour, but the one that they did a couple years ago, I think at this point at the Majestic Theater in Dallas.
Mm,
Absolutely,
yeah,
I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that was more of a pro. I mean, I've seen a lot of people. I've seen Bruce Springsteen, and Lyle Lovett is just as professional and just as great.
oh yeah,
It was
yeah,
super cool.
yeah.
So
He's
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, that's great, man. What about Bob Dylan? What does he mean to you?
man, that's a tough one for me. I'm always the kind of guy I buck the system. I'm a contrarian, so it took me a while to really be willing to get into Bob. He's without a doubt one of, if not the greatest songwriter of the last 100 years.
Yeah,
It's he influenced probably everybody that I worship. So,
yeah,
but for me to say that I'm an expert either way would be a lie. Blonde on Blonde, Blood on the Tracks,
hmm,
those records, huge.
yeah.
They're amazing, and I need to do more homework as far as Bob Dylan goes. That's my answer.
He's a fascinating character. What do you listen to now? Maybe what's the last record you listened to, or what comes to mind of something you've been listening to recently?
Let's see. What's the most recent thing I listened to? I had to listen to I can't remember the name of it now. There's a woman out of Nashville she's been around for a long time. That this is not going to be very rapid fire. Melissa Carper's new record too, though, that came out the same day my record did, and I love it. I think it's amazing. Ashley McBride, she did that like kind of a concept record about a small town, Lindenville or something like that.
Okay.
Great. It's a perfect example of witty songwriting that is funny and will also move you you know, no, maybe not tears, but there's some serious subject matter happening there too, and I really like that. I like the attention to detail there.
Yeah, cool. What pisses you off?
Mm. There's a lot of things that piss me off. I think the most infuriating thing is is for people to assume that folks from the country are stupid, and B, it infuriates me whenever a small amount of people reinforce those stereotypes for everyone else. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah.
It really grinds my gears. That's another reason I want to make country music that sounds like it's made for someone who knows how to read, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And do you have any kind of practices that you lean on, other than perhaps music? Maybe your significant other. Do you have any other practices that, you know, meditation or long walks or anything when the shit's, you know, really getting tough? Do you have any particular practices that you lean on?
yeah, I've found that when I'm at my best, I have a little checklist of like activity tracker that I have in a journal that I keep, and I make sure to meditate in my own way. You know, I'm not sitting in a sweat lodge somewhere doing that, but it may be me at the duck blind. But
yeah.
I make sure to do that. I make sure to read. I make sure to write at least, you know, 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And exercise is huge. I mean, I hate it as much as the next guy, but I feel so much better once I've done it, you know? So that's the main thing. I've found that whenever I get stuck artistically, taking a step back and running or going to the gym or going fishing or whatever, spending time with my wife, whatever it needs to be to kind of remove myself from that situation and then come back with fresh eyes, that's a big one for sure. So
where would you say you are on the, I don't know if I want to use the word happiness or well-being, whatever you want to say, just general happiness. 1 to 10, 10, you're just incredibly ecstatic, and 0, you're suicidal. Where are you in general? In general, how would you rate yourself in terms of how happy of a guy you are?
Man, you know, to keep it short, I guess maybe I would say maybe about a 7.
Yeah.
I feel better than I've felt in years, as far as my attitude and outlook on life and all those things. But I'm always kind of the guy that's like, man, you show me someone who's satisfied, and I'll show you someone who's about to fail. You know, so
yeah.
I want to keep a little bit of desire in there and some hope too. You know, but
I hear you. Yeah,
we're getting close to perfect. It's
good. It's always striving. And as a footnote to that, let me complete the thing I was saying earlier about towns, because, you know, the guy asked him, why are your songs sad? And he said, they're not all sad. Some of them are downright hopeless. And the guy pushed it a little bit. And man, you should look up this clip. It's on YouTube. The look on Towns' face when he looks at him with this just searing look, and he goes, you don't think life's sad? And it's just, okay. It is sad. It is sad.
Yeah, it is.
Well, let's see. Number one tip you would give to yourself or to some other if you could talk to yourself at age 17 or some other young person who wants to be a songwriter, what's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of giving them a tip?
You have to do the work. You have to. There's no TikTok reel. There's no get rich quick scheme. You got to do it, because at the end of the day, everybody can smell a fraud from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And the only thing that will make you through and through a pro is to know in your own heart that you're a pro. And the only way to get there is to do the work. Yeah. So if you're going to sign up for this, you better be ready to have your dick knocked in the dirt for a long time before you start to see it. But once you start to see it, then you got something that nobody can take away ever.
Yeah, that's great.
You know? So
that's great. All right, man. Well, the last two questions I always ask everyone. One is, what do you think happens when we die? You have any concept? Do you have any belief? You have any feeling? Do you even think about it? What, we're only here for a relatively short time, and it's kind of mysterious. If
Yeah,
you said you've
yeah,
had people close to you die, I can remember when my dad died. It was so bizarre, man. It was so weird because people die every day. We all know we're going to die, but it's like he was here and now he's gone, and it just didn't make sense to me. And you know, I think it's one of those questions that most of us do ponder. So anyway, I'm curious what other people think. What do you think happens when we die?
oh my God, that's such a hard one. Truthfully, and I'll probably get burned for this, but part of me, a huge part of me, believes in reincarnation. Like I feel like there is, um, I don't know. Some part of me thinks that there is like there are several right nows happening.
Mm, yeah,
There are several dimensions where
yeah.
our souls are floating around, picking out where they're going to go next. I truthfully feel that way, and I can't really explain it,
Yeah.
other than I've buried a lot of people and close friends, and maybe that's why I feel this way. Um, is the finality of just nothing, but um, it's hard to say that I have a completely Christian outlook on things, because that's far from what I just said. But uh, yeah, I'm much more spiritual than I am than I am, concrete religion guy, and I
Mhm.
really truthfully feel like that there is there's a point where our souls get to decide where they're going to go and who their parents are going to be. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. I,
Well,
but
to a lot of Hindus, it would, because that's called the bardo, and in
oh,
Hinduism,
really?
there is that concept that you actually you reincarnate and you choose your parents,
I
which is
guess I should do some
fasc-
reading on that.
fascinating. All right, man. Last question: when you are dead and gone, what do you hope people say about you? Yeah, imagine your funeral. What do you hope people say other than, "Oh, that guy was a good dude"? What do you hope they say?
Oh man. Well, honestly, I think that's kind of all I do hope, is that people say I was a kind person, and um, that I did as much as I could to help other people, because I really think that that's about the only thing that we've got to do here. I don't know. It's so wild. It's so wild to think about. I just hope that people can take my art and say that it made them feel like they weren't alone, or made them feel like there was some hope.
Yeah,
So if there's anything, I suppose it'd be that.
yeah, that's beautiful, man. Isaac, thank you so much for taking this time to connect.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've enjoyed all of our interactions, and I'm sure I'll see you down the road. So thanks again, and take care, brother.
man. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Right on. Take care, man. See ya.